If you ever see him again, run, because he won't let you go twice. The first time I saw Alexander Moretti, it was raining hard enough to blur the city lights into something unreal, like the world itself was hiding what he truly was, and I remember thinking he didn't belong to the same reality as me, not with the way people moved when he walked in, not with the silence that followed him like a shadow you couldn't escape. And yet somehow he looked at me like I was the only thing in the room that mattered, like everything else was just noise, and that should have been my warning, but it wasn't, because I didn't know then what it meant to be seen by a man like him. I didn't know how dangerous it was to matter to someone who owned half the city without ever raising his voice. And maybe if I had known, I would have left sooner. Maybe I would have never stayed long enough to fall into something I couldn't climb out of, but that night I stayed, I listened, I let him close the distance between us inch by inch until I could feel the heat of him without him even touching me, and when he spoke my name for the first time it didn't sound like a question. It sounded like a claim, like something inevitable had already been decided long before I walked into his world, and I told myself it was nothing, just another powerful man used to getting his way, just another story that wouldn't touch me. But I was wrong, because the night everything broke didn't come with warning. It came quietly, with a door left half open and a moment I wasn't meant to see, and I remember standing there frozen as the truth twisted into something unbearable, as the one person I trusted and the one man I shouldn't have loved collided in a way that shattered everything I thought I understood. And I didn't scream, I didn't confront them. I just left, because some betrayals are too loud to face, and I thought leaving would end it. I thought disappearing would be enough to erase him from my life. But I didn't know then that men like Alexander Moretti don't forget. And they don't lose what they believe is theirs, not even after years, not even after you build a new life in a place no one should be able to find you, not even when you're standing in a quiet town miles away from everything he controls, holding two small hands that changed your entire world, because the past doesn't stay buried when it belongs to him. And the moment I heard his voice again, low and steady behind me, I realized I had never really escaped at all. The sound of his voice did not belong in that quiet town. It cut through the air like something too sharp, too familiar, and my body reacted before my mind could catch up. My fingers tightened around theirs as I slowly turned, because pretending it was someone else would have been a lie. I could not afford. Alexander stood there exactly as I remembered, and completely different at the same time, taller, somehow broader in presence if not in frame. His dark suit, perfectly tailored like the city, had never let him go, but his eyes, those were the same. Cold and searching, like they had been looking for something for far too long and just found it. Emily, he said my name like it had weight, like it had history, like it had never left his mouth in all these years. I shook my head once, not in denial but in warning, because if he took another step, everything I had built would collapse. You should not be here, I said, quietly, forcing my voice not to break. The twins shifted behind me, curious, too young to understand why the air suddenly felt heavy, why their mother stood so still, like a statue, holding back a storm. Alexander's gaze dropped to them again, slower this time, more deliberate, and something changed in his expression, not softer, not weaker, but deeper, like a calculation had just turned into a realization. How old are they? He asked, and the question landed harder than anything else, because it was not anger, it was not accusation, it was something closer to truth catching up with him. I did not answer. I could not, because the numbers would connect, the timelines would unravel everything I had spent years keeping hidden. You do not get to ask that, I whispered, but my grip on the children tightened instinctively, and that was enough. He saw it. He always saw everything. That was his curse, and mine. His jaw flexed once, as if holding back 100 questions, and then he stepped closer, not threatening, not rushing, just closing the space inch by inch, like he had done the first night we met. Like distance had never been something he respected. You left without a word, he said, and there was no anger in it, just something raw and unfinished. I looked for you. I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my chest for years. You lost that right, I said, because it was easier than explaining the night that broke me, easier than saying I had seen something I could not unsee, easier than admitting I had run not just from him, but from the truth that followed me even here, even now, because the past does not disappear, it waits, and the moment Alexander Moretti finds you, it comes back all at once. I should have walked away, then I should have taken the twins and disappeared again before he could say anything else, before he could look at them like that, like he was Already connecting pieces I had spent years hiding, but my feet would not move because part of me had always known this moment would come, not like this, not here in the middle of a quiet street where nothing bad was supposed to follow me, but still inevitable. Mom. A small voice whispered behind me, and it broke something in the tension because they were not part of this. They were never supposed to be part of this world. I turned slightly enough to shield them more than before. Go inside, I said softly without taking my eyes off him, but they did not move. They never did when they sensed something was wrong, and Alexander noticed that too. Of course, he did. His gaze softened for half a second before sharpening again, like he was forcing himself back into control. They listen to you, he said quietly, and there was something almost unfamiliar in his tone. Not power, not command, just observation. They're my children, I replied immediately, too quickly, and the moment the words left my mouth I knew I had said too much. His expression did not change right away, but I saw at the shift, the realization settling deeper this time. Not a question anymore, not doubt, just truth forming in real time. Ours, he corrected gently, and that word felt heavier than anything else, like it reached into the years I had buried and pulled them back to the surface. I shook my head again, but it was weaker now because denying it felt pointless when he was standing right there, seeing everything I had tried to hide. You do not get to do that, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You do not get to show up after years and rewrite what happened. He took another step closer, and I felt my breath catch, not from fear but from memory, because this was how it had always been with him, closing the distance until there was nowhere left to run. Then tell me, he said, and for the first time there was something raw in his voice, something unguarded. Tell me what I did that made you disappear, like I never mattered. And that was the moment everything shifted, because he did not know. He truly did not know, and the certainty I had held on to for years suddenly felt less solid, less absolute, like maybe, just maybe the night I ran away had not been what I thought it was. I laughed, but there was no humor in it, just disbelief cracking through everything I had built to stay strong. You really do not know, I said, and the words came out slower this time, heavier, like each one had to push through years of silence. His eyes locked onto mine, unblinking, waiting, and that made it worse, because if he had been angry, if he had been defensive, it would have been easier to hate him, easier to hold onto the version of him I had carried all these years. But he just stood there like he was ready to hear something that might break him, and for a second I wanted him to feel even a fraction of what I had felt that night. You were not supposed to see me, I continued, my voice dropping as the memory pulled me back into a place I had tried so hard to forget. That is what she said before I opened the door. His brow tightened, slightly confusion flickering across his face, but he did not interrupt. He never interrupted when something mattered. Sophia knew I would come early. She told me you were waiting for me. I swallowed hard because even now saying her name tasted wrong, like something poisoned. I believed her because she is my sister, and because I trusted you. The last word almost broke me, but I kept going because stopping now would mean falling apart completely. I walked in, and I saw you with her. There it was, simple, direct, the moment that ended everything. But even as I said it out loud, something felt different, like the memory was shifting under the weight of his silence. You were not looking at me. You were not even aware I was there. And she smiled at me like she had been waiting for that exact second. I closed my eyes briefly, because that smile had haunted me longer than anything else. Not him, not the moment, just her expression, like she had won something I did not know we were fighting over. She said you chose her, that I was just a mistake, that you would never have said it to my face. I opened my eyes again and met his gaze, expecting denial, expecting something, but what I saw instead was something else entirely, something colder, something more dangerous than anger. I never said that, he replied quietly, and the certainty in his voice made my chest tighten in a way I was not prepared for. I never chose her, he added, and this time there was no hesitation, no doubt, just truth laid bare, and suddenly the ground beneath everything I believed began to crack. The silence that followed his words felt louder than anything we had said before, like the air itself was waiting for me to decide what to believe, because if he was telling the truth, then everything I had built my life on, every choice, every mile I had put between us, had been based on a lie, and that was not something I could accept easily. She said you did not want me, I whispered, and my voice sounded smaller, now less certain than before, like the ground beneath me was shifting faster than I could keep up with. Alexander's jaw tightened, but he did not look away, not even for a second. Emily, I was not even supposed to be there that night, he said, and that alone made my heart stutter, because it did not match the version of events I had replayed in my mind for years. Sophia called me. She said you needed me, that something was wrong. I left everything to get there. His voice stayed steady, but there was something underneath it, something controlled but burning. When I walked in, she was alone. She said you changed your mind, that you did not want to see me, that you were done. I shook my head immediately, because that was not true, that had never been true, but he kept going like he needed to get it all out before I could stop him. I told her to leave. I told her I was not interested. I told her she should never speak for you again. His eyes darkened slightly, not with anger, but with something deeper, something closer to regret. She did not listen. She stepped closer. She said if I would not choose her, then I would lose both of you. My breath caught, because that part one did not know, that part had never been part of the story I carried. I pushed past her and went to find you, but you were gone. He finished quietly, and the way he said it, the way his voice dropped at the end, made something inside my chest tighten painfully, because that did not sound like a man who had betrayed me. It sounded like a man who had lost something he could not replace. I looked at him, really looked this time, at the lines that were not there before, at the exhaustion hidden behind control, at the way his gaze kept drifting back to the twins, like he was trying to memorize something he had missed. And for the first time since he walked into my life again, I felt something dangerous, something I had buried a long time ago. Doubt not about him, but about everything I thought I knew. You are saying she lied, I said slowly, and even as the words left my mouth, I realized how fragile they sounded, how easily they could break everything. Alexander did not hesitate. I am saying she made sure you would see exactly what she wanted you to see, he replied, and the certainty in his voice sent a chill through me, because if that was true, then I had not run from betrayal. I had run straight into a trap that had followed me for years without me even knowing it. The word trap echoed in my mind louder than anything else, because it changed everything, and at the same time it changed nothing at all, because even if Sophia had lied, even if that night had been staged, I was still the one who ran. I was still the one who disappeared without looking back, and that truth sat heavy in my chest like something I could not escape. Why did you not come after me sooner? I asked before I could stop myself, because that question had lived inside me for years, buried under anger and survival and everything I had built to keep going. Alexander did not answer right away, and that silence felt different this time, not empty, not distant, but careful, like he was choosing how much of the truth to give me. I did, he said finally, and the words were quiet, but they landed harder than anything else. I searched every place you could have gone, every contact, every record, every city that had even the smallest connection to you. His eyes held mine steady, unflinching. You disappeared completely, Emily, not like someone running, but like someone who did not want to be found. I swallowed, because he was right. I had not just left, I had erased myself, changed names, moved states, avoided anything that could trace back to him, to that life, to the pain. I thought I understood. I was pregnant, I said before I could think better of it, and the moment the words left my mouth, everything stilled. Even the air between us, like the world itself, paused to absorb it. His expression did not shift immediately, but I saw it, the way his shoulders tightened, the way his breathing slowed, like he was processing something too important to rush. I found out 2 weeks after I left. I continued, my voice softer, now not defensive, not sharp, just tired. And I did not know what to believe anymore. I did not know if you would even want them. If what I saw was real, then they would just be a reminder of something broken. My hand moved instinctively, brushing over one small head behind me, grounding myself in the present. So I chose, for all of us, I chose to disappear, to give them a life that did not belong to your world. Alexander stepped closer again, but this time there was no control in it, no calculated movement, just something instinctive, like he was being pulled by something he could not resist. You should have told me, he said, and his voice was low, but it carried something deeper than anger, something closer to loss. They are mine too. I shook my head, but there was no strength in it this time. I did not know that then, I whispered, because that was the truth, the only truth that mattered in that moment, and for the first time since he appeared in front of me, I saw something break through his control, something real, something human, because this was not just about us anymore, this was about everything we had lost. Without even knowing it, for a moment neither of us spoke, and it felt like the entire world had narrowed down to the space between us, and the two small hands still holding on to me, like I was their anchor, and maybe I was, but I Had never planned for this. I had never planned for him to stand here looking at them like they were something he had lost before he even knew they existed. What are their names? He asked, and the question was soft, careful, like he understood that every step forward now mattered more than anything before. I hesitated, because names meant identity, names meant connection, names made everything real in a way I could not undo. Ethan and Lily, I finally said, and saying it out loud felt different this time. Heavier, because now he knew those names would never belong only to me again. His lips parted slightly, like he was repeating them silently, committing them to memory, and I saw it the way something shifted behind his eyes, not ownership, not control, but something deeper, something I had never allowed myself to imagine. How old? He asked again, and this time I answered, because there was no point hiding it anymore, for I said, and his breath caught just barely, but enough for me to notice, enough to understand that he was counting back, calculating the years, the timing, the moment. Everything changed for both of us without either of us knowing. You raised them alone, he said, and it was not a question, it was an acknowledgement, and I nodded once because there was no pride in it, no need to prove anything, just the truth of what had been. I had to, I replied quietly, because there had never been another option, and something in his expression tightened again, not anger, not blame, but something like regret settling deeper into him. You should not have had to, he said, and the words were simple, but they carried weight like a promise he had not been given the chance to keep. I shook my head slowly, because that line was dangerous, because it opened doors I had spent years closing. That is not how it works, I whispered. You do not get to step into their lives now and decide what should have been. He held my gaze steady, not backing down, not pushing too hard, just standing there like he was prepared to stay no matter what I said next. I am not here to decide what should have been, he answered quietly. I am here because they exist, and because you exist, and I was never given the choice to be part of that. And there was not power, not demand, just something real, something that made it harder to walk away, because this was not the man I ran from. This was someone I did not fully understand anymore, and that scared me more than anything else. His words settled into something deeper than I expected, not forceful, not demanding, just present, like he was no longer trying to control the situation, but refusing to walk away from it, and that made everything harder, because anger is easy to hold on to. Anger gives you direction, but this uncertainty, this shift in everything I thought I knew left me with nothing solid to stand on. You say that now, I replied quietly, but there was no bite in it, no sharp edge left, because part of me was already questioning everything that had brought me here, every decision I had made to protect what I thought was already broken. Ethan shifted beside me, his small hand tightening around mine. Mom, who is he? He asked, and the question landed heavier than anything else, because there was no avoiding it now, no way to keep the lines separate. The past had stepped fully into the present, and there was no undoing it. I hesitated, my throat tightening, because how do you explain a man like him to a child? How do you explain years of absence, years of silence, years of choices that cannot be rewritten? He is. I started, but the words did not come, because there was no simple answer. Not anymore. Alexander did not move closer this time. He did not interrupt. He just stood there waiting, and for the first time I saw restraint in him, real restraint, not the kind that comes from control, but the kind that comes from understanding that this moment was not his to take. He is someone I knew a long time ago. I finished finally, and even as I said it, I felt how incomplete it sounded, how much it left unsaid. Ethan looked between us, confused, but he did not press further. He never did when he sensed something fragile, and Lily leaned slightly against my side, her small presence grounding me in a way nothing else could. Alexander's gaze softened again just for a second as he watched them, and something in that look made my chest tighten unexpectedly, because there was no calculation in it, no strategy, just something honest, something that did not belong to the man I remembered. You do not have to explain everything now, he said quietly, and that alone caught me off guard, because I had expected pressure. I had expected him to push, to demand answers, but he did not. Instead, he took a step back, creating space between us, like he understood that forcing this would only break it further. But I am not leaving, he added, and there it was, not a threat, not a command, just a statement, simple and unshakable, and I realized then that this was only the beginning, not the end, not even close, because whatever truth had been buried between us for years had finally surfaced, and now it was no longer a question of running, it was a question of what happens when you can no longer pretend the past does not exist. The space he created should have made it easier to breathe, but it did not, because distance did not erase what had just happened. It only made it clearer, more real, more impossible to ignore, and I stood there feeling the weight of everything I had spent years avoiding settle around me like something that had finally caught up. We should go inside, I said softly to the twins, and this time they listened because even they could feel the shift, the way something had changed in a way none of us could fully understand. Yet Ethan nodded first, always the protector even at 4, and Lily followed, her small hand still wrapped around mine as we stepped toward the door, but I could feel it, his presence behind us, not moving, not leaving exactly where he said he would be. I paused with my hand on the handle because walking inside felt like crossing a line I could not uncross. Like once I let this moment continue, there would be no going back to the life I had carefully built without him. Emily, his voice came again, quieter, now not calling me back, but reaching just enough to make me stop. I turned slowly, because part of me already knew this was not over, not even for today. I am not here to take anything from you, he said, and there was no hesitation in it, no shadow of the man who once controlled everything around him, just truth laid out without protection. I just want the chance to be part of what I should have never lost. The words settled deep, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just steady, and that made them harder to ignore because they were not trying to convince me, they were simply there waiting for me to decide what they meant. I looked at him one more time, really looked, not at the power, not at the past, but at the man standing in front of me now, and for the first time, I did not see someone I needed to run from. I saw someone I did not fully know anymore, and that uncertainty felt more dangerous than anything else because it meant I could be wrong. It meant everything I believed could be wrong. This changes nothing, I said finally, but my voice did not carry the same certainty it once did, and I knew he heard that too, because he nodded once, not agreeing, not arguing, just accepting that this was where we stood now. It changes everything, he replied quietly, and there was no force behind it, just truth echoing in a way I could not dismiss. And as I stepped inside, closing the door between us, I realized something I had not allowed myself to consider in years. I did not feel safe. Because he was gone, I felt unsettled. Because he was back, and somewhere deep down, a part of me that I thought was long buried had just started to wake up again. The door clicked shut behind me, but the sound did not bring relief. It echoed instead, like something final and temporary at the same time. Because for the first time since I built this life, I knew it could be reached. I knew it had been found, and there was no undoing that. Ethan looked up at me immediately, his eyes searching mine the way they always did when something felt different. Is he coming inside? He asked quietly, and the question made my chest tighten because I did not have an answer, not one that would stay true for long. No, I said after a second, forcing calm into my voice, not right now. Lily tugged at my sleeve gently, her small voice softer, but just as curious. Why was he looking at us like that? I swallowed, because how do you explain recognition to a child? How do you explain that someone just saw themselves in you for the first time? Because he has not seen you before, I answered, carefully guiding them toward the living room, trying to keep everything steady, normal, like the ground had not just shifted beneath us. Ethan frowned slightly, thinking in that quiet way he had. He looked like he knew us, he said, and that simple observation landed harder than anything else because it was true. He had known without needing to be told, without needing proof. Something in him had recognized what I had tried to hide for years. I knelt in front of them, then bringing myself to their level because this moment mattered more than anything else. Listen to me, I said softly, brushing a strand of hair back from Lily's face. Nothing changes tonight. You are safe, you are home, and that is what matters. They both nodded, trusting me completely, in a way that made my heart ache. Because trust like that is fragile. It depends on truths I was not ready to give them, yet I stood slowly, glancing toward the window without meaning to, and there he was, still outside, still exactly where I had left him, not pacing, not leaving, just waiting, like he had all the time in the world. And maybe he did, maybe for the first time, he was not chasing control, he was choosing patience, and that unsettled me more than anything else because patience meant intention, patience meant he was not going anywhere. I turned away, quickly exhaling slowly as I tried to steady myself, but it did not work because his presence was still there, pressing against everything I thought was mine alone. And for the first time since I walked away years ago, I realized something I could not ignore. I had not just been hiding from him, I had been hiding from the truth. And now that truth was standing right outside my door, refusing to disappear again. Sleep did not come easily. That night it never did, when something unresolved pressed against the edges of my thoughts. And this time it was louder, heavier, impossible to ignore. I stood by the window longer than I should have, watching the street below where he had been standing hours ago, but He was gone now, or at least no longer visible, and that should have made it easier. It should have given me space to breathe again, but it did not, because absence did not mean he had left. It only meant he was choosing when to return, and somehow that felt more certain than anything else. I turned away, finally forcing myself to move through the quiet house, checking doors, checking windows. Like routine could still anchor me in something normal, something safe. Ethan and Lily were already asleep, their small breaths steady, their world untouched by the storm that had quietly found us again, and I stood there in the doorway for a moment, just watching them, memorizing the simplicity of it, because I knew it would not stay that way, not anymore. I stepped back, closing the door softly, and leaned against the wall for a second, letting the silence settle around me, but it did not feel empty. It felt like waiting, like something unfinished, stretching between the past and the present, and pulling me somewhere I had tried not to go for years. My phone buzzed suddenly, sharp in the stillness, and my heart jumped before I could stop it. Because there was only one person it could be. I stared at the screen for a second before picking it up, my fingers colder than they should have been, and there it was, just one message, no name needed, no explanation needed. I knew. We need to talk about Sophia. The words were simple, but they hit harder than anything else because they pulled everything back to the beginning, to the one piece that had never truly settled, that had never made sense. No matter how many times I replayed it, I swallowed, slowly reading it again, because this was not about us, not just about us anymore. This was about the truth, the one thing I had never fully faced, the one thing that could change everything if it was not what I believed. And for the first time since he walked back into my life, I realized something I had not allowed myself to consider before. Maybe I had not just been protecting my children from him, maybe I had been protecting myself from the possibility that I was wrong all along. I did not reply right away, because some messages are not meant to be answered quickly, some truths are not meant to be rushed, and I stood there in the dim light of the kitchen, staring at the screen like it might change if I gave it enough time. But it did not. The words stayed exactly the same, pulling me back into something I had spent years avoiding. I set the phone down slowly, like distance might give me control again, but it did not, because the moment had already begun. Whether I answered or not, I poured myself a glass of water, even though I was not thirsty, just to have something to hold, something to ground me in the present. But even that felt unfamiliar, like I was moving through a space that no longer belonged entirely to me. My mind kept replaying everything he had said, every detail that did not match the version I had believed, every small crack that had started to form in something I thought was unbreakable. She made sure you would see exactly what she wanted you to see, his voice echoed again, and this time it did not sound like an excuse, it sounded like a possibility, and that was more dangerous than anything else, because if it was true, then I had built my entire life on something incomplete, something manipulated, and that meant the past was not just unresolved, it was wrong. I pressed my hands against the counter, closing my eyes for a moment, trying to steady the wave of emotion rising, too fast, too overwhelming, because anger had always been easier. Anger gave me direction, but doubt left me suspended between what was and what might have been, and I did not know how to stand in that space. My phone buzzed again. And this time, I did not hesitate. I picked it up immediately, like some part of me had already made the decision before I could fully accept it. Another message, no greeting, no hesitation, just truth pressing forward. She's not who you think she is, Emily, and she never was. My breath caught, because there was something final in that statement, something that did not ask to be believed, it demanded to be faced, and I realized then that this was not about reopening old wounds, this was about uncovering something that had been buried on purpose, something that had shaped everything that came after. I looked toward the hallway, where my children slept, and felt the weight of what this could mean, not just for me, but for them, because if the past was not what I believed, then neither was the story I had told myself about why I left, why I stayed away, why I chose this life over the one I thought had broken me. And for the first time since he reappeared, I understood something clearly. This was not just a conversation waiting to happen, it was a truth waiting to be uncovered, and whether I was ready or not, it was already coming for me. I did not sleep that night, not really, because even when my eyes closed, my mind refused to follow, every thought looping back to the same place, the same question, the same possibility, that everything I believed about that night, about him, about her, was incomplete, and that was something I did not know how to live with anymore. By the time the first light of morning slipped through the curtains, I was already awake, already standing by the window again, like something in me expected him to still be there, but the street was empty, quiet, unchanged, and that should have made it easier. It should have given me space to think clearly, but it did not, because the absence only made his words louder. I picked up my phone again, staring at the last message like it might answer something on its own, but it did not so. I typed before I could overthink it, before I could retreat back into the safety of silence. Then tell me everything. I hit send, and the moment it was gone, there was no taking it back, no stepping away from what I had just invited into my life. The reply came faster than I expected, like he had been waiting for that exact moment to meet me. Just 2 words, but they carried weight, direction, inevitability, and I felt it settle deep in my chest, because this was at the line I had been avoiding, the moment where past and present would collide without anything left to hide. I turned toward the hallway again, listening for the soft, steady breathing of Ethan and Lily, grounding myself in what mattered most, because whatever truth waited for me out there, it would not change them. It would not change the life I had built for them, but it could change everything else, everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I had escaped. I moved through the house, slowly getting ready with quiet precision, like control and small things could prepare me for something much bigger, something I could not predict. When I stepped outside, the morning air felt different, sharper, clearer, like the world itself was holding its breath. And I knew, without needing to look, that he would be there, not because he had to be, but because he chose to be. And as I walked forward toward whatever came next, I realized something I had not fully understood until now. I had spent years running from a man I thought had broken me, but today I was walking toward the truth that might finally show me who really did.